Have you ever felt that something ancient is unfolding again? The sound of sirens, the smoke over sacred lands, and the clash of empires, it all feels eerily familiar. As missiles light up the night sky over Jerusalem and Tehran whispers warnings to the west, many begin to ask, is this just history repeating itself, or is it prophecy? Could the Bible have predicted this unraveling long before it was news? Across centuries, holy texts have spoken of great wars and final battles. But there's a name that echoes louder than the rest: Armageddon. Not just a battlefield, but a cosmic convergence of good and evil. A word that stirs both fear and fascination. Yet few truly know what it means or where it leads. In a time when truth is drowned in noise and facts blur into fear, we turn to something ancient, mysterious, and perhaps divinely orchestrated. Not to predict headlines, but to uncover patterns too precise to ignore. The prophets didn't speak in vague poetry. They gave names, places, kingdoms, and their warnings may be more timely now than ever before. But what is Armageddon, really? Is it a literal war to end all wars, or a metaphor for something deeper? Why does it center on a specific place in Israel, Megiddo? And how could one word from an apocalyptic vision shape how millions view today's conflict? To understand what's happening now, we must return to where it all was first spoken. This story will not offer easy answers, but it will trace the ancient fault lines that still crack the ground beneath our feet. And if you follow the thread, you may start to see the fire on the horizon was not lit today. The word Armageddon appears only once in the entire Bible, Revelation 16:16. Yet that single mention has birthed countless interpretations, fears, and films. In the original Greek, the term is Armageddon, meaning Mount of Megiddo. But there's a problem. There is no actual mountain in Megiddo, only a hill, a tell built from centuries of ruins. So why would Scripture point us there unless the ruins themselves held meaning? Megiddo is soaked in blood and prophecy. It's been the site of over 20 major battles throughout history. Pharaohs fought there, kings fell there, empires clashed over its dusty soil. It stands at the crossroads of ancient trade and military routes, a perfect battlefield, a place where kingdoms rose and crumbled, again and again. Revelation's reference isn't accidental. In apocalyptic literature, places aren't just physical, they're symbolic. Megiddo represents more than war. It is the climax of rebellion, the collision point of earthly power and divine will. John, the author of Revelation, evokes Megiddo not just for geography, but to summon the weight of every fallen empire into a single word: Armageddon. And yet, this isn't just about ancient history. Revelation links Armageddon to the pouring out of the sixth bowl of wrath. It's a divine judgment, a gathering of nations for war, not by chance, but by unseen design. The kings of the earth are drawn there, almost possessed by something greater than politics, something spiritual, prophetic, inevitable. So when the world trembles at war in the Middle East and leaders speak of final conflicts, is it coincidence that they gather near the valley of Megiddo? Or are we watching a shadow of Revelation stretch across modern soil? The name has been spoken. The place still stands. The tensions rise.
The word Armageddon appears only once in the entire Bible, Revelation 16:16. Yet that single mention has birthed countless interpretations, fears, and films. In the original Greek, the term is Armageddon, meaning Mount of Megiddo. But there's a problem. There is no actual mountain in Megiddo, only a hill, a tell built from centuries of ruins. So why would Scripture point us there unless the ruins themselves held meaning. Megiddo is soaked in blood and prophecy. It's been the site of over 20 major battles throughout history. Pharaohs fought there, kings fell there, empires clashed over its dusty soil. It stands at the crossroads of ancient trade and military routes, a perfect battlefield, a place where kingdoms rose and crumbled, again and again. Revelation's reference isn't accidental. In apocalyptic literature, places are not just physical, they're symbolic. Megiddo represents more than war. It is the climax of rebellion, the collision point of earthly power and divine will. John, the author of Revelation, evokes Megiddo not just for geography, but to summon the weight of every fallen empire into a single word: Armageddon. In the Bible, Israel is never just a place. It's a symbol, a stage, a promise. From Abraham's first steps in Canaan to the final visions of Revelation, the land pulses with divine purpose. Prophets called it the apple of God's eye, the center of the nations, the place where history meets eternity. And for centuries, the world watched as Israel faded from maps, only to reappear in 1948. Was that merely political coincidence, or the ticking of a prophetic clock? The prophets foretold a time when nations would surround Jerusalem, consumed with hatred and ambition. Zechariah 12 speaks of a day when all the nations of the earth will gather against it. But it won't be the end of Israel. It will be the moment of divine intervention. The city will become a cup of trembling, and the world will reel. A warning hidden in plain sight, now echoed in today's headlines. Jerusalem, though small in size, holds immeasurable spiritual weight. 3 major religions claim it. Empires have bled for it. And even now, world leaders walk on its streets with cautious reverence and hidden agendas. In prophetic terms, it is more than a city. It is a signpost. Its peace or its war reflects the temperature of God's timeline. Ezekiel, Isaiah, Joel all saw this convergence coming, a time when Israel would stand again, vulnerable yet unyielding, a nation reborn and immediately under siege. They spoke of alliances forming, enemies rising, boundaries drawn not by men, but by destiny. To the ancient prophets, Israel's survival wasn't just political, it was divine evidence, proof that God's plan is still unfolding, one act at a time. So when the world focuses its cameras on Jerusalem, and when rockets fall like hail from distant enemies, the Bible suggests we should not just watch with fear, but with discernment. Because Israel, in prophetic vision, is not just a nation, it is the hourglass, and the sand is running out. And yet, this isn't just about ancient history. Revelation links Armageddon to the pouring out of the 6th bowl of wrath. It's a divine judgment, a gathering of nations for war not by chance, but by unseen design. The kings of the earth are drawn there, almost possessed by something greater than politics, something spiritual, prophetic, inevitable. So when the world trembles at war in the Middle East and leaders speak of final conflicts, is it coincidence that they gather near the valley of Megiddo? Or are we watching a shadow of Revelation stretch across modern soil? The name has been spoken. The place still stands. The tensions rise.
In the haunting chapters of Ezekiel 38 and 39, an ancient prophecy emerges, one that feels strangely modern. A powerful leader named Gog from the land of Magog is said to rise, gathering a coalition of nations to attack Israel. They descend like a storm, covering the land,
confident in victory, but unaware of what awaits. This isn't just war, it's divine judgment. And many now ask, are we watching this unfold? Magog, Meshech, Tubal, once obscure names, are now mapped onto modern regions: Russia, Iran, Turkey. Some theologians argue that Ezekiel described alliances forming centuries before they existed. A united front of hostile nations, ideologically and militarily aligned, turning against Israel. And at the center, a motive not just of conquest, but of plunder, vengeance, and pride. The echoes between prophecy and geopolitics grow louder with each new headline. But the war described is no ordinary battle. God himself intervenes through earthquakes, fire, confusion, and judgment. The invading armies fall not by Israeli defense, but by divine wrath. Ezekiel emphasizes that the world will know that God is holy when he defends his people. It's not just about survival, it's about revelation. Still, many remain skeptical. How could a prophecy written 2,500 years ago mirror the alliances of today? Is this theological overreach or a map drawn in eternity? Ezekiel didn't name nations by our terms, but he drew borders with startling precision. And perhaps the greatest question isn't if it will happen, but when. So as alliances form and tensions rise in the north, we're left to wonder if Ezekiel saw our world through divine eyes. A storm may be gathering, not in theory, but in reality. And if Gog is moving.
In the book of Daniel, chapters 10 and 11 reveal a celestial curtain being pulled back, showing not just human politics, but spiritual warfare shaping the rise and fall of empires. Daniel is told of a fierce struggle between the king of the north and the king of the south, two great powers clashing over generations, locked in a brutal dance of conquest, betrayal, and ambition. But these were not just ancient kingdoms, they were shadows of something greater, recurring across time. Scholars have long connected these figures to historical empires, the Seleucids to the north, the Ptolemies to the south. Yet others believe this prophecy is dual-layered, fulfilled in history, but pointing toward a future geopolitical storm. The king of the north rises with overwhelming force, while the king of the south pushes back. Their battlefield? The Middle East. Their motivations? Power, ideology, and control of sacred lands. Some draw bold parallels: northern powers like Russia or Turkey, southern powers like Egypt or Arab coalitions. It's not about perfect one-to-one matches, but about the prophetic pattern. Daniel foresaw a world where dominions would rise only to fall under divine orchestration. In this narrative, human pride is always outmatched by God's providence, and every political move echoes a spiritual war playing out behind the veil. At the center of Daniel's vision is conflict, but also clarity. God is not absent in the chaos. He's orchestrating history toward a predetermined end. The angel tells Daniel that these visions are for the time of the end, not to scare, but to awaken, to remind us that nothing on earth moves without heaven's permission. The kings rage, the armies gather, but the throne above remains unshaken. So as new alliances harden and borders grow tense, perhaps we are not just watching strategy, but prophecy in motion. Daniel saw kingdoms rise and fall long before we named them. And if his vision still stands, in the book of Revelation, a vision unfolds, 4 horsemen riding out to shake the world. Each one symbolizes a facet of apocalypse: war, famine, death, and conquest. Their horses thunder across the earth, leaving trails of devastation and despair.
These figures aren't mere symbols, they are warnings etched in cosmic ink. And in today's fractured world, their echoes grow impossible to ignore. The first rider, wielding a bow, brings conquest and conflict. He sows discord, turning brother against brother, nation against nation. This is not just a call to arms, it's the unraveling of peace on a global scale. The second, a rider on a fiery red horse, wields the sword, bringing bloodshed and war. Cities burn, alliances shatter, and the drums of battle beat louder. Following them, the pale horse rides, its rider named Death, with Hades close behind. Famine and plague trail in their wake, crippling economies, starving millions. This horseman reminds us that war's toll is not only on the battlefield, but in every hungry belly. Desperation seeps into the hearts of people, and hope begins to flicker dimly. Yet, amidst this despair, the warning is clear. These events are pieces of a divine puzzle. The fourth horseman, Conquest, rides with a crown and bow, a stark reminder of ambition's deadly cost. Empires rise and fall under his shadow, their leaders blinded by power's lure. Revelation's horsemen are both literal and spiritual, a metaphor for the chaos infecting humanity. They remind us that war and destruction are intertwined with human pride and brokenness. But they also herald that these events are leading somewhere toward a final reckoning. As tensions escalate globally and news headlines echo with conflict and crisis, the four horsemen feel less like myth and more like prophecy in motion. Their ride is relentless, unstoppable, until a higher power intervenes. Will we recognize the signs, or will we be swept away by the storm?
In the Gospels, Jesus speaks with a voice both tender and thunderous about the days to come. He warns his followers of wars and rumors of wars, of nations rising against nations. The world will tremble, famines will strike, and pestilences will sweep the land. But his message is not one of despair. It is a call to watchfulness and faith, to see beyond the chaos, to discern the times unfolding. Jesus paints a picture of trials, tribulations so fierce they will shake even the elect. Families will be divided, loyalty tested, and fear will grip many hearts. Yet amidst this storm, he promises hope and deliverance for those who remain steadfast. His words echo through centuries. Be not afraid, for I have overcome the world. The call is clear: vigilance, prayer, and trust in the unseen. The complex web of alliances and rivalries in the Middle East today seems to echo the ancient prophecies with uncanny precision. Iran's rising influence, Israel's strategic position, Russia's northern presence, and the USA's involvement create a volatile mix. Through the biblical lens, these nations often appear as players in a prophetic drama written long before modern borders existed. Each power moves with calculated intent, yet many argue they are unknowingly fulfilling a script etched in Scripture. Is history repeating, or is this the unfolding of a divine plan? Iran, often seen as a modern Gog or a key antagonist, pushes aggressively against Israel and its allies. Its rhetoric and alliances evoke images of the coalitions described in Ezekiel 38, gathering against God's chosen land. Israel stands at the center, a small but unyielding nation caught between these great powers. Russia's involvement in Syria and its shifting alliances add another layer of complexity and tension. Meanwhile, the USA plays a balancing role, sometimes a mediator, sometimes a contender. This geopolitical dance mirrors the tension between the King of the North and the King of the South in Daniel's visions. It's a struggle not just for territory, but for influence over one of the most spiritually significant regions on Earth. Religious and ideological fervor fuels these conflicts, adding a prophetic urgency that ordinary politics cannot explain. Many believers watch these developments as signs that the long-awaited time of the end may be near. But for those caught in the middle, the stakes are very real and terrifying. Yet the biblical narrative also offers a deeper layer, one of spiritual warfare behind these political moves. Prophecy warns of not only human armies, but of unseen forces influencing nations and leaders. The growing instability is both a test and a signal. Humanity's fragile peace can unravel at any moment. But it also calls for vigilance and faith, reminding believers that no power can thwart the ultimate divine purpose. The stage is set, and the players are in motion. As the world watches these tensions escalate, we must ask, are we witnessing merely political conflict or the fulfillment of ancient prophecy? The lines between history, theology, and current events blur. And in that space, a profound question arises. What role will faith play as the storm approaches? In a world swirling with conflict and uncertainty, faith becomes both a refuge and a challenge. The prophetic storms shaking nations can stir fear, but they also invite a deeper spiritual awakening. For believers, the question is not just what will happen, but how they will respond amid the chaos. Will fear paralyze, or will hope ignite a fierce trust in God's sovereign plan? Faith is the anchor in a sea of turmoil, steadying the soul against the crashing waves. The Bible calls believers to be vigilant, watchful as the dawn breaks on uncertain days. This vigilance is not mere awareness, but an active, prayerful engagement with the world and God. It means standing firm, even when darkness thickens and the future seems unclear. Faith is not passive resignation, but a courageous resistance to despair. It is trusting that beneath the tumult, God's purposes are still unfolding. Yet faith also wrestles with doubt and pain, especially when suffering touches lives closely. The tension between hope and fear is a spiritual crucible, testing the depth of belief. Many biblical figures faced the struggle: Job, Jeremiah, even Jesus in Gethsemane. Their stories remind us that faith is forged in the fire of trial, not the ease of comfort. To believe deeply is to embrace uncertainty with unwavering trust. In amid global crises, the role of faith extends beyond personal refuge. It becomes a light to others. Believers are called to embody hope, compassion, and peace in a fractured world. Their witness is a counterpoint to despair, a sign that God's kingdom transcends earthly conflict. In a time of shaking foundations, faith plants seeds of healing and renewal. It reminds the world that even in the darkest night, dawn is coming. So, as the prophetic winds howl and the world holds its breath, faith remains the quiet, powerful force that anchors and inspires. It calls each person to choose between fear and hope, between surrender and vigilance. In that choice lies the true battleground of the last days. As we stand on the precipice of history, the question lingers: has Armageddon already begun? Are we witnessing the final act unfold, or is this only the quiet prelude to a greater storm? The signs are unmistakable. Conflict, chaos, and upheaval ripple across the globe. Yet the end remains shrouded in mystery, unfolding in ways both visible and unseen. This ambiguity invites us into deep reflection and sober vigilance. Armageddon, in biblical terms, is more than a battle. It is the culmination of cosmic conflict. It represents the clash between good and evil, light and darkness, truth and deception. But this struggle may not burst forth suddenly. It might creep into our world subtly, almost imperceptibly. The Bible warns of deception, gradual hardening of hearts, and widespread spiritual blindness. Could the world already be caught in this silent, creeping apocalypse? At the same time, hope remains the undercurrent running through Scripture's darkest passages. The promise of restoration, redemption, and divine justice offers a light beyond the shadows. Believers are called not only to watch, but to live as witnesses, embodying hope amid uncertainty. This means embracing mystery without despair and action without fear. The end is unknown, but the path is clear. Faith, hope, and love endure. History teaches that human eyes rarely see the full picture at once. Prophecy unfolds like a tapestry, threads woven slowly, patterns emerging over time. What feels like chaos may be divine choreography moving toward an ultimate resolution. And, while we wait, our task is to hold steady, to seek truth, and to serve with courage. The question is not only when Armageddon will come, but how we will live before it does. So, as the shadows lengthen and the world braces for what may come, we stand invited into a story larger than ourselves. Armageddon may be a distant thunder, or it may already echo in the quiet moments around us. Either way, the call remains: stay awake, stay faithful, and keep watch.